Chapter 9. A Journey into the Unknown. We tried to be about our Father's business as we waited for our passports. On a number of occasions, his messenger appeared to me and gave me advice, preparing me for the future. One day, as I was sitting on my bed, I saw a man in white clothes. He had a trumpet in his hand. As I watched, he blew it 3 times. "Wake up," he announced. "The day is coming." I was on my feet in seconds, sharing my vision with Maria. Later, I fell asleep on the sofa. The same man appeared to me in a dream. "I'm telling you to wake up because the time of your departure is drawing near. In 121 days at 10 o'clock a.m., you will leave this country. Tomorrow you will receive a telegram that will gladden your heart." I told the dream to my family and we counted on up the days. According to the angel, we would leave Romania on July 24th, 1984 at 10 a.m. I waited impatiently for the promised telegram. When the postman brought it, it was from the American Embassy. I signed for it and read it excitedly. It instructed my family to go to the embassy in 10 days, just as the angel had promised. In just a short time, Mike, my son-in-law, rushed in from work. "Father," Mike burst out excitedly, "the passports came last week. We need to pick them up." This news surprised me. It was so unexpected. I thank God for working in such a miraculous way. The next day, the family planned to pick them up. As requested, we arrived at the embassy. What date would they place on our visas? My heart pounded with anticipation. When the officer stamped the visa inside my passport, he said as clearly as could be, "You will be leaving this country on July 24th. His words filled our ears like an explosion. We felt like screaming for joy. Even though we didn't want to leave our homeland and we didn't know where we were going or what we were going to do, we rejoiced in the power of God's faithful word to us. We all agreed that we were not afraid of anything as long as God was with us. As soon as we arrived home, we began to put our home in order for moving. We had a mink farm, which worried us the most. To sell hundreds of minks in 4 months would take a miracle. In spite of our concern, buyers came from all over, not only purchasing them at higher prices than we expected, but they also brought gifts. As the time of our departure grew closer, friends and loved ones started coming to visit us, saying sad goodbyes. This time was difficult for us. We all wept. It was impossible not to. As I write this, the tears still burn my eyes and my heart aches. Every day, my house was full of visitors. Day after day, I found myself unable to answer the one question everyone persistently asked. Why does it have to be like this? The time went so fast. I wished I could have made it longer. Neither I nor my family could stop crying. Meanwhile, the police were following me everywhere, watching everything I did, like they felt sorry about letting me go. 1 week before I was to leave, at about 8 p.m., 4 policemen appeared at my door. "We just came by to see how you're feeling," one of them said. They struck me on the head and back with their blackjacks, then laughed in ridicule and left. Horrified that they would dare to do something so cruel and inhuman, we could only keep our mouths shut and hold our tempers. Only 5 days before we left, another incident saddened me. We had a dog named Labus, a big, strong, white animal with black spots. He was a handsome dog who always barked out a welcome when I came home. Even when I was far away, he somehow knew I was coming. In the winter, we would tie him to a sled and he pulled my grandsons on the ice. Now, when we were getting ready to leave, he wouldn't bark. He wouldn't eat. He grew more and more depressed. The boys tried to play with him, but he wouldn't play. He became more withdrawn with every passing day. How could he know we were leaving? On July 13th, we were all standing outside. Labus looked around at all of us, barked 3 times, and ran away. The next morning, we found him dead on the riverbank. Even an animal shared the agony of our coming separation. In the following 4 days, we visited all the places we loved. We walked along together through forests with their thick woods, tall grasses, and thousands of flowers that filled the spring air with wonderful fragrances and colors. We wandered through places where we once picked mushrooms ate wild berries, and drank ice-cold water from bubbling springs. We made private pilgrimages to favorite havens where we once had been free to sit and think, listening to the gentle, delicate songs of birds and watching bees flit from one flower to another. My grandsons had taken some of their first steps here and later learned to run joyfully, trying to catch butterflies. Even the bushes on the banks of the Siret would never be forgotten, or the river's current with its continuous surging rhythm. All our lives we had enjoyed the pleasures of diving in for refreshing swims, or lowering our nets into the water to catch a platter full of fish for dinner. Each of these things is etched in my mind. Even now, it almost seems that I am there. 2 days before we left, we prepared a huge feast, and a large group of our neighbors, relatives, and friends came. We were the only family that had ever left that village. We could hardly make any progress on our packing with so many people coming and going. I gave away everything we had worked so hard for. The house was taken away by the government. Later, my brother would buy it back from the government for himself. The remaining minks were given to a Christian friend who wanted them. The furniture was given away. Everything was gone. A whole life was gone in one day. On Monday, the 18th of July at 8 a.m., 2 cars pulled up in front of the house to take us to the airport. I took our few suitcases and put them in the cars. By 9 a.m., I could hardly get our hand baggage out of the house for all the people. We got dressed and tried to eat something, but our appetites were gone. Everybody was crying. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we all got on our knees and prayed one last time together. Outside, I shook hands with over 100 people. Some I will never see again. My heart ached unbelievable. Although I was crying, I tried not to burden everyone with the grief I felt. It seems but yesterday. Our friends hugged us, saying, "After you go, it will be as though the 7 of you had died. But still, we will not stop praying and fasting for you to return." The men drove the cars out of the driveway. In just a few minutes, we had to go. With tears in our eyes, we were looking in all directions. Physically, I felt no strength. To this day, I don't know any pain more unbearable than leaving your loved ones, not knowing if you will ever see them again. I looked up to see my oldest grandson running back to kiss the door of the house. Everyone wept uncontrollably. Finally, all we heard was the sound of the automobile engines. We watched the hands of loving friends waving goodbye. All the way to Bucharest, we thought of the good times we'd had there, and we cried all the more. I quite often think of the places in Romania and wonder if I will ever lay eyes on them again. Then and now, I can only say, I will leave everything in the hands of God. On the way to Bucharest, we went through the city of Suceava, where my son-in-law worked in a glass factory. We stopped long enough for him to tell his fellow workers and friends goodbye. He had worked there 10 years. Although the police sometimes made a point of following him, he was loved by his fellow workers. Mike, too, had experienced many difficulties because of his Christian faith. He had been trained to be the head of a corporation, but because of his religious beliefs, it was very hard for him to obtain even his position as top glass blower. He loved his art of glass blowing and looked forward to practicing it in the United States. There he would not be put down for his religion. As of today, his wish has not come true. He has been unable to find employment in his line of work here. He continues to ask God to provide him with a quality job in glass blowing, and I believe that he will one day find a way to use the unique skill he worked so hard to learn and loved so well. Arriving at Bucharest, we spent a few more days at the homes of other friends while the police checked our baggage, got our tickets, and took care of other small details. Uncertain thoughts raced through my mind. Whose house am I going to there? Will we find new friends? How will we even support ourselves? The night before our flight, we shared one more prayer, and our friends and family members agreed to see us off at the airport. None of us could sleep, so we were up and dressed early. After a word of prayer, we took the luggage out of the house. At the airport, there were about 50 people waiting to tell us goodbye for the last time. After our final farewells, it was announced that everyone with tickets to Italy should board the plane immediately. We shook hands, hugged everyone, and made our way down a large hallway. Our luggage was thoroughly checked. My daughter requested that the airport agents not take anything out of her bag. Instead, they took her into another room and made her strip to be inspected. They have very ugly methods of searching, and we were treated brutally even as we left the country. By the time they finished with us, our entire family was left with only 3 suitcases. The rest, mostly personal mementos and photographs, was confiscated by the airport agents as a final act of cruelty. We boarded the plane at 10 o'clock a.m. It was the 24th of July. we were on our way. Our time in Rome provided an interesting transition from Romania to the free world. How strange to see the happiness of the Italian people. In Romania, everyone seems depressed and joyless. Romania is one of the poorest countries in the world today. In Rome, there were the Italians with their good foods, fruits, vegetables, and colorful clothing. Most of all, they were free. During our 9 days there, we saw many of the sights that made Rome so famous. As we looked around, I thought of all the Christians who had given their lives for the Lord in this historic city. I consoled myself thinking that they had suffered far more than I had. They lost everything, including the right to live. I too had sacrificed my possessions, but I had God to thank for the fact that I was alive, and so was my beloved family. One day, the woman at the hotel desk called me aside. "Mr. Duduman, you be careful. Someone was just here asking of your whereabouts." Our family had planned to go out for the afternoon, but instead we stayed close to the hotel. Later on, I went to the American Embassy. There stood a Romanian woman who had worked in the American Embassy in Bucharest. I had already been informed that she was a spy for the Romanian government. Had she been sent to Rome to assassinate me? At long last, we were on our way to America. Again, whirlwinds of thought spun around in our minds. What if no one was waiting for us? Where would we go? What would we do? My little grandsons sat quietly, safely strapped into the airplane seats. With very pale and sad faces, they asked, "Grandpa, where are we going?" "I don't know. I wish I did, but I can promise you that God will take care of us." We arrived in New York on August 3rd. There we were put in a hotel for one night. I had the telephone numbers of some Christian believers there. Hopefully, I dialed one of them, whose name is John Hoytia. He was delighted to hear my voice and even happier when I told him where I was. Soon he arrived, and we were so encouraged by a time of prayer with him and 2 other Christians who arrived the next morning. After New York, we finally found our way to Fullerton, California. Our arrival there was a rude awakening. Some strangers greeted us and took us to an apartment they had rented for us. Despite their wonderful intentions, we were deeply troubled, for the smell in the apartment was so terrible that we could hardly bear it. To our amazement, the apartments in California allowed dogs and cats that left a vile smell behind, but they didn't want children. The people who picked us up prepared a wonderful meal for us, but grateful as we were, we simply couldn't eat. The smell, the dirty walls, and the lack of any place to sleep depressed us. Late into the night, we lay on the filthy carpet, weeping. Great discouragement gripped my wife and children. "If we had not started traveling with the Bibles," Maria sobbed, "we would be in our country, with our friends and family. We had good things around us." I stretched out on the floor that night with grave despair in my heart. Both Maria and I were crying. When I eventually fell asleep, I had a strange and remarkable dream. I found myself back in Romania. Maria and I were there visiting an apple orchard. For some reason, we weren't allowed to go in. The owner approached us and said, "What are you doing here? Don't you know that you have no right to be here? Your rights are in America. Get out or I'll call the police." I pleaded with the owner to let us walk through the beautiful orchard just one last time, but he would not. As I stood waiting, I suddenly realized that it was getting dark outside. A strange occurrence, since it was only about 1 p.m. I looked all around to see where the darkness was coming from, and was terrified to see a volcano erupting. Its lava spread over the nearby homes, then began to rise across the ground. "Maria," I said in the dream, "I guess you know we're going to die." Maria smiled. "I am so happy that I'm going to die on Romanian ground." Then suddenly an American helicopter lowered to rescue us. When I got inside the copter, I looked into the familiar eyes of the pilot. He was the man dressed in white, the angel of the Lord. He said nothing, just motioned for us to sit down. When we were high over the ground, he finally spoke. "Look down." I looked, and the land of Romania was covered with an army of tanks, machine guns, and aircraft, all poised for battle. "See, all of this evil will eventually happen. This is why the Lord is taking you from Romania, to save you. Now you are in a position to help your people from your new home. You will provide tremendous assistance to your Christian brothers and sisters, as well as to your loved ones. This is why I've sent you to America. So be strong and trust the Lord fully. He will not let you down." Next, it seemed we were over California. The angel said, "There is San Francisco. There is Sacramento and Modesto. Soon we will see Los Angeles. I had no idea there were such places in California, or even in the world, but I still remember the exact names. At last we were over Fullerton, where we now live. You can go home, the angel said, but I want to tell you what will happen. You have seen a number of cities. The day will come when I will punish the citizens of those cities because of their sins. Their sin has reached into heaven. God will punish them just as he punished Sodom and Gomorrah. How will this happen? Surely they are able to defend themselves against any imaginable invasion. That is your opinion, not the mind of God. The Russian government will have all the information regarding the whereabouts of American missiles. They will have the exact locations of the weapons factories. Even now they are preparing to attack against America. When America believes there is peace and safety, the Russians will lead an all-out attack. They already have it planned. They plan to attack from such remote bases as Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, Mexico, and the ocean. They have had these plans for a long time, but God has not yet allowed them to be fulfilled. Nevertheless, the day will come when America will be punished for her sins by fire. I was terrified. Why did you bring me here to die? Why didn't you let me die where my parents died? Don't be afraid, he spoke calmly and quietly. The pure of heart will not be punished. Those who are untouched by the sins of others and are faithful and true will hear the trumpet of God and the voice of God's angel crying, "Wake up!" They will be told where to go. Where will they go? The helicopter soared again. I caught my breath, for as I looked down, my eyes swept across beautiful cities. 2 rivers flowed through one of them, and growing alongside the other was a vast, lush forest. This is your refuge when the times of tribulation fall upon California. Your family and all those who hear the voice of the Lord will understand the message of God's mighty trumpet. Deeply troubled, I awoke from my restless sleep. The next morning, I told my family the dream and began fasting for 21 days. If the dream is from you, Lord, I pray that I will have it again.